Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 30,000 members. In this episode, we explore the work of dogs on the prison estate, the dog handlers who work with them, and the POA's Dog Handlers Consultative Committee. Joining me are NEC member Jackie Marshall and two members of the committee, Lester Cobley and Mick Doyle. Jackie Marshall, NEC member for the POA, and is something of an expert on the dog handling section, which is something that members may not know too much about. They'll see dogs wandering around the estate, but I think the role has changed dramatically over the last 20 years or so, hasn't it, Jackie?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was an expert, but I have had time in my service as being a disciplined drug dog handler in prisons where we didn't have dog sections. And because the drug problem was increasing, they were bringing more search dogs into prisons that wouldn't normally have dogs in there.
And before even that modest step forward, what historically has been the roles of dogs in and on the prison estate?
So in the high security estate, they were the ones that had the dog sections. They would have patrol dogs, which are normally German Shepherds, and they'd have the search dogs as well, which are normally gun dogs. And at that time, there was arms and explosives dogs and drug dogs.
But now, and increasingly, there are more and more dogs on the estate.
Yeah, we've moved on now. So we have what we call body scanning dogs for drugs. So they'd go down a line of people, and if they got a scent, they'd sit down in front of them. We've still got the area search dogs and the arms and explosives dogs. We've now got hooch dogs, mobile phone dogs. So they just put to greater use altogether now.
In terms of the interface, if you like, between the dogs and the dog handlers, how many dog handlers are there roughly?
So we've roughly got 230 handlers who've got one dog and around 250 handlers who've got two or more dogs.
The dog handlers receive an allowance for looking after the dogs, I understand.
Yeah, they receive a care and maintenance allowance. And basically that's for looking after the dogs in your own time, having the kennel in your garden, having water access to clean your kennel, to bath dogs. We've got washing of the dog beds. Some will have heaters in the kennel. So it's basically everything that you do outside of work with your dog.
So Lester, what made you want to become a dog handler, and how difficult was the process of being selected?
Like everybody, initially I joined as a prison officer. And so, working with dogs is always something that I fancied doing prior to joining the prison service, but kind of wrote that idea off. That never happened. I went in a different direction. But then when I did join the prison service, and of course it was a prison that had a dog section, that was kind of a possibility that was there anyway then. So that's how it came about initially. And then I did apply for vacancies when they came up after a few years in the job. And as with a lot of other organisations, it's basically you spend some time in the main career as a prison officer, get to grips with that, and then as vacancies come up, you can apply for a specialism through an interview process. There is a lot of competition. There was back then, and I think generally there still is now. A lot of people fancied, obviously, being dog handlers, and they would say that. And like all things, you'd have to go through the SIFT process, and then if you don't get through that stage, you've got to go through the interview process. And then, of course, depending on the ranking and point scoring of the interview, depends on whether you get the position or not. So there was all that. Yeah, there was a lot of competition, but again, I think, with anything that you're interested in, you have to do the groundwork and you have to show your commitment by, I actually attended training days, dog handler training days so these were handlers that were current with dogs, and I'd sort of go along in my own time to see what went on and what it entailed. So that's one of the commitments that if you're interested, you make, and that perhaps helped. And of course, what happens is all these people that say that they're interested, well, unless they sort of keep trying, it doesn't always happen. To answer your question, there is the competition there, but I think you've just got to, keep trying, basically.
Mick's experience shows that if at first you don't succeed, the only thing to do is to try, and try again.
Well, it took me 7 attempts to get there, to be fair. I first applied in 1996 and I wasn't successful until 2010. But I've been on dogs just about to start my 13th year on dogs. Bit of a history. We're a dog loving family. Before becoming a dog handler, I've had previous working with gun dogs and breeding gun dogs. So that was kind of my want to get into it, my drive to want to get into it. I'm a dog loving person, and it's all sort of second nature from there, really. It was never not on my agenda to try to be a dog handler.
Right. Was it one of the things that attracted you into the prison service role to start with, or was it just like a welcome surprise once you were in and you realised this was a possibility?
Well, search dogs were fairly new to the service when I joined. There weren't that many about. Not every establishment had them, and that's why it was such a tough job to get into. It wasn't until there were patrol dogs in certain establishments, but search dogs came along later on. So no, for me it was prison officer first, and then every opportunity that application that I could get in for dogs, I just tried to get onto it. It was, for me, it was my goal. I'd rather done that than go up the promotion scale. I've got 2 dogs. I've got a spaniel. He's a search dog. He's what we call an active search dog. He searches areas, cells, classrooms, workshops. But we also do things like post and parcels, prisoners' property, and stuff like that with him. He's also trained for sniffing out hooch, the prison illicitly brewed alcohol. And I've also got a GP dog, which is one of, in old school terms, we used to call them patrol dogs. But being part of the regional team, we can mix and match. I don't have a passive dog at the moment. Currently, I have a passive dog, but I've got a patrol dog or a GP dog and an active search dog. So we cover 16 jails. There are now, because of EGS, we've recently recruited a lot more handlers. Enhanced gate security has meant there's a need for more handlers. There's some new work involved in that. And we do a lot more prison entry searches for staff, contractors. Prison visitors are always screened when they come in to visit prisoners. But we're doing a lot more entry searches for staff and for contractors when they're coming into the establishments with the passive dogs. Also bags, things like bag searches and stuff like that, contractors, but we're doing vehicles and deliveries and stuff like that with them. So because we're a regional team, we're kind of deployed to different establishments based on intelligence. If there's an intelligence picture building up to disrupt criminal activity, it's for things like stability of establishment and risk, if whatever the risks are involved.
Well, the dog that I have is a patrol dog, so they're used for perimeter security. Basically, we have to patrol all areas of the prison in like a beat system, as they call it. Obviously, the idea of that is we carry out random checks depending on the shift and the time of day or night, because obviously it also includes fairly regular night shifts. So we patrol all areas, obviously alerting the control room to anything they need to know about or being directed to anything that they tell us about. We have security checks to carry out. Again, there's various tasks to do with security systems that we carry out because we're in the grounds there doing that. So a lot of the job is patrolling and carrying out these random checks. The primary role as well is that we're there if there's an attempted escape, because we can intercept that, hopefully.
Yeah.
But then also we're used for what's called, or we can be used for what's called the flexible deployment in support of staff. So the flexible deployment of dogs means that now we can be deployed onto a wing or even to another prison, come to that, in support of staff in control situations, in alarm bells. That authority was brought about quite a number of years ago after a report carried out by Woodcock. It was one of the recommendations that we could be used and should be used in that way. So again, we do get used for that. I mean, that is obviously on an as need basis. If there's an incident, and it's deemed that dogs are needed to assist, we will be used for that. I have to say that all my time as a dog handler, we are being used more for that now than ever.
Would you and your fellow handlers have responsibility for, say, a degree of training of the dogs that they're paired with?
Yeah, we tend to get them at around about 12 to 18 months old, so that they're mature enough to begin a training course. That's ideally the age. Occasionally, if the circumstances allow, a handler can perhaps bring on a young puppy from 8 weeks old and such, like a bit like puppy walking. That occasionally happens as well, until the dog is of the age that he can be put on a course. Yes, we do play a role in the training, definitely, because it's interactive. It's a two-way process.
I'm actually an accredited trainer for the drug sniffer dogs. It's a role I'm interested in. I like we're not just training the dogs, we're training the handlers as well, because we want the handlers to be able to read and recognise the dog's behaviour, handlers to have control of the dogs at all times. Sometimes the handlers are working too closely with dogs and don't actually see what the dog's doing. They're right on top of the dog. If you stand back a little bit, you can see a little bit more of what's going on. Yeah. Dogs, anything from, I would say, minimum 8 months. Between 8 and 18 months is ideal time to start working with a dog, and they can go on for as long as they're enjoying it, really. As long as the dogs are still working and providing the service, they can go on. Some dogs don't, they tend to drop off at the age of sort of 7 or 8, but some dogs that have got high drive will continue to work for longer. So my Spaniel's getting on a bit now. He's 9 now, but he's still providing 100% service, so there's no reason to retire him. It's a case of 68 is not too late for him. You've got to understand how dogs learn, basically, and dogs learn through repetition and association. So whatever you're trying to, the desired behaviour you want to achieve, you set that up, and you only reward the dog when he or she's providing that desired behaviour. No two dogs are the same. They don't all indicate in the same way. They don't all search in the same way. And that's why we kind of try and train the handlers to develop a method of training so nothing's missed during the searching. Like, for example, we go into a room or a cell. When we're searching it, we try and search from the threshold of the doorway in a clockwise direction all the way around the external, and we cross over. There's always like a 1 meter crossover, so there's nothing missed on the threshold, and then we clear whatever's in the middle. And it's basically the dogs are just screening and searching.
Presumably the dog handler and their dog are a team. I mean, both would be effective on their own, but it's the combination and the relationship between the two that really delivers maximum output.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, we obviously have to control and direct the dog and perhaps know most effectively how to use them, or sometimes when not to use them as well. But as regarding the training, I mean, okay, obviously we will be put on a course with a trainer, but a big part of that is the fact that we are involved in perhaps teaching exercises such as obedience and getting control and things like this. So some of these things you can actually do on your own just with the dog. Other things which involve bite work, obviously you have to have a dog trainer that's playing the role of a criminal with all the suitable protection on. So obviously that's a little bit different. But I think I would say as well is that somebody new coming on to being a dog handler, obviously they're learning something new. If you've got a few years of experience behind you, then you can probably play more of a proactive role in training your own dog in some things just by experience,
Mick, how does that relationship change if you're a member of a regional team such as yourself?
Being part of the regional team, we all mix together. We all back each other up regarding the work. We all support each other, and that is important. I do hear stories of the GP handlers kept completely separate to the search dog handlers. We're all one same team, and that's one thing that I think needs to be driven across it. All the dog handlers are all dog handlers. We work very closely with our colleagues in the DST, the search teams, Local search teams at my home establishment, Chelmsford, have got a local search team, and we work really closely with them. And it proves to be successful. They know how we operate. We don't have to explain everything every time we're working the dogs. Teamwork is really important.
So, what's the sort of regulatory environment, if I can put it that way? Do dog handlers need to be licensed? How are they assessed? What happens if there's a concern that a dog is not being properly looked after?
So what you do is you do your initial training where you'd be matched with a dog. So you do your initial training. At the end of that training, then you have to go through a license, which is like an assessment from the inspectorate. So they would put hides out or whatever, and you'd go around and just try and find everything that they've put out. And the inspectorate at that time will also be looking at the dog to see that it's well kept and everything else that goes in the dog world. And then you have to do continuation training throughout the year. And then every year that your dog has to be licensed, it has to go through that test again. And it's not just the dog, it's the handler and the dog that are going through the test, because obviously the handler can control where the dog is searching and checking to make sure that the dog has searched every area and not missed places out.
Yeah, and of course, a handler's circumstances can change, can't they? I mean, if someone has really bad luck, I don't know, becomes homeless, for example, or goes through some sort of trauma away from work, that can impact upon their ability to be a credible dog handler, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. Or if they become ill, or if they get an injury, or if a patrol handler gets a back injury, it might be a case that their injury is so severe that they can't control a large German Shepherd again, because obviously the weight of a German Shepherd is quite hefty.
Are there many incidents of people handing their dogs back?
No, it's a job that officers tend to keep once they've got it. Like I say, it's only if it's retirement, or like I say, if the handler got seriously ill or injured, then the dogs, if they're at a certain age, would be rehandled. If they're nearing retirement, then the dogs will be retired, and the handler will get the first choice of whether they want to keep that dog or not.
The dogs are highly skilled, and obviously the handlers are highly skilled as well. Is there kind of recognition for that, either within the service or outside of the service?
I mean, every year we have what are called dog trials. Whether that's a search dog, search dog trials can be held at their prison establishment, and patrol dog trials as well are held. So what happens is we have kind of like a format which is held on the training field, which will start with obedience exercises such as walking to heel, agility, jumping over jumps, basically, searching for what we call property. So if you imagine that an item has been discarded, let's say in a field or outside a prison, well, dogs can actually be used to search for that, free search, and they will pick up on that item with human sense on. So that's one of the many exercises that dogs are trained for, and all these things are part of the trial. So there'll be obedience, there'll be searching for a person in a building, and then the manwork exercises such as chasing a criminal. With trials like this, it encompasses a very high degree of control. So it's a point scoring exercise. So on one hand, the dog is judged on his drive and ability and maybe aggression in some ways if it's a patrol dog, but then at the same time also then very highly scored on the control. And again, it will be similar with the search dogs. They will be searching and judged on that and marked accordingly. So that will happen at a sort of a local jail level. The overall winner, of course, at that jail, the dog will then go through to perhaps a regional championships, regional area, and several dogs from that area will compete together again in the same exercises, just to repeat. And then the winner of that area, basically there'll be a handful of dogs from around the country of various areas, and they will go forward to the prison dog trials nationally. That's generally held at somewhere like Newbold Revel. And that is the national championships, which is held over several days. The same exercises are then repeated again, a mixture of obedience, agility, and then the man work. And there is then one overall winner. So that's how it's recognised. It's recognised nationally within the prison service, and along each stage, there are trophies that can be awarded.
The main thing for me is the pleasure of the job. We have got, without a doubt, my opinion is we have got the best job in the prison service. I have been establishment based, but I find this more interesting. Being part of a team, I go to different establishments that have different risks, and it doesn't test the dogs, but it gives the dogs a lot more variety, so it keeps them interested and gives them a better drive to work.
The dogs must be very highly trained and very skillful. The handlers must also be extremely skillful and adept. You could imagine a prison dog winning Crofts or something like that, couldn't you? Has that ever happened?
No, I had my very first drug dog was in the happiest dog in the city competition. Came second.
We'll turn now to the Dog Handlers Consultative Committee, which was set up in 2020, I believe. What are the sort of issues that are preoccupying the minds of the committee at the moment?
Dog handlers, it's like all small groups of prison staff, really. They've got their own problems within little groups. So with the dogs and that, we look at equipment and clothing, listen to how the dogs are used, are they being used correctly? Patrol dogs are a victim of their own success, really, because I think the last major attempted breakout we had was the IRA in Whitemore. Since then, I don't think there've been any escape attempts in the high security where we've got the dogs patrolling the grounds. So they've cut the numbers down because they all used to be 24 on a section and now they're 18. We've got issues when, if the dog's ill and it's been to the vets and the vet says it needs kennel rest. So that's something we're looking at the moment. So kennel rest means resting in your kennel quietly, which is at home. So what does a handler do? The handler actually can't go into work and do a full shift because the dog needs still looking after. If it's just an injury or something like that dog's got, then you can kennel rest it at work or in a van in a kennel. But if the dog is poorly, just like us sometimes, they need somewhere quiet.
My line manager is a POA member as well. So I'm, one of the reasons I'm on the POA Consultative Committee is because he is a POA member and he understands that there's, the need for the union. To be fair, I don't get many of the handlers coming to me with problems. I'm not an elected official. They, I would tell them to report to their home base establishment committee first. But if it's specifically dog related, if they're POA members, they come to me with an issue, I can raise it at the POA Consultative Committee to discuss the issue. And it's basically advice from other members of the committee in around the country, because there's not many new problems. It's all problems that most of us have dealt with in some form or another in different areas.
Right, so that pooling of expertise and exchange of information is a very valuable thing in itself.
I mean, I'm on that myself at the moment, so various dog handler representatives are on it. And that was kind of really just so that if there's something that might be, dog handlers might need to be consulted on, it might be something quite simple like suitable dog handler uniform or something like that. Well, that assistance is there, and that's handy to have union representation. And of course, they can consult us because they don't really know the specialism quite the same, so they can consult with us on that. So it's handy for things like that. I'd add to that now that I think it is more useful now, more relevant now to have that closer link with the union, partly because, as I said earlier, we're now being deployed into more control situations, and the potential is there that dogs are being used more proactively. I'm talking more especially at the moment patrol dogs. I mean, search dogs obviously are always being used as well, very proactively. But there is the potential with patrol dogs that prisoners or somebody could get bitten. Ultimately that is what can happen. And it could be that the handler needs some kind of representation over that just as part of the process, because obviously we have to justify everything that we do.
I imagine some members would be listening to this and thinking that being a dog handler sounds an attractive option, but it's not for everyone, is it? I mean, what are some of the things associated with the role that perhaps aren't immediately obvious, that you'd only kind of find out once you start getting into it?
I would say the biggest thing is the amount of time that you spend looking after the dog, and also the amount of personal time. I mean, basically, you're never really off duty. It affects your family life, it affects your family, it affects your home life, it affects your whole life. And I always say that it's both the best job in the world and it's the worst job in the world, and it depends on what sort of person you are. Yes, people do think it's a good job, from the outside, especially some prison staff. They look out from the landings and they see a dog handler walking by in the sun, which looks good. But then, as I say, the other side of that coin is that when they go home and they can switch off, we've still got to exercise the dog, feed the dog, rain or shine, night or day, take them to the vets when they need it. Again, we can't just take off perhaps for a day or a night out with family at a moment's notice. We've got to consider the dog and how long it's going to be left alone or if he's fed, things like that. So it's a massive commitment. And again, even when patrolling, I mean, again, it looks nice in the summer, but we're out in all weathers, cutting, on nights quite regularly when it's very cold and bitter. And so, again, it comes down to what sort of person you are. You've got to be quite massively committed. And if you are, it can be a great job. But you'll soon find out whether you're committed or not once you've been doing that for a while.
Mick, would you be of the same view?
No, it's not all glamour. It's, you've got to have a real understanding of family, and they need to, the family need to understand that whenever, we can't just drop everything and go away for a weekend, or if there's a family emergency somewhere out the country, I need to make plans with the dogs before I can attend. The dogs take priority over everything. You can't just leave them in the kennels for good. Basically, the longest the dogs are left in their kennels unattended is overnight. But one of my dogs is a bit of an early riser. He likes to get up about 5 o'clock in the morning and come out of the kennel barking, which the neighbours aren't too pleased about. But I'm lucky they're understanding. They know what I do, and they accept that. That's the situation.
But as well as the out-of-hours 24/7 care, working arrangements can place significant demands on dog handlers too.
First of all, to be a dog handler, you've got to be super flexible. Yeah. Part of this regional team, we get short notice deployment to different establishments based on the risk. It could be that parcels come over the fence one evening and we've got to go and search for it the next day. So we're getting out-of-hours phone calls to attend a different establishment than what we were originally detailed to. By being flexible, we're lucky. Southwest region, we've all got vans.
Yeah.
Southwest and South Central, it's a massive area we cover, right up to from Dartmoor Prison across to Winchester Prison, and then from Portland up to Aylesbury. So it is a big area. There's only 16 prisons in it, and we could be deployed to any of them. Being we've got 7 GP handlers in our team, and sometimes it could be a case of a halfway through your shift or coming towards the end of your shift, and they need the GP dogs up at establishment that's 2 or 3 hours away. So you've got to be flexible in that circumstance. You can't be rigid with your hours. But the team are fair. The management understand it. Whatever we do over and above our hours, we always get back. They don't quibble if we have to book accommodation to stay overnight. There's nothing like that.
Yes, I can see the protection of the POA would be invaluable if the management team or management style were to change. Jackie, the issue of having an ongoing commitment to the dogs is really the standout feature of this work, isn't it?
Yeah, so prison officers normally, once they leave the gate, the time's their own. If you're a dog handler, you leave the gate and your work's not finished because you've got to go home, feed your dogs, walk your dogs, possibly bath the dogs, clean a kennel, probably walk them again before you go to bed. And it's the same thing in the morning. You can't get up, jump in the shower, put uniform on and go off to work because you've got to think about your dogs. Some dogs will be fed in the morning as well. Kennels might need cleaning in the morning and they need to be exercised before you go to work so that once you're at work, they're ready to start.
So if you're going to be a dog handler, it kind of follows that you've got to be comfortable and you've got to be very happy about sharing your life.
Yeah, definitely, because they're a big part of your life. You know, you can't go home on a Friday evening when your weekend off and think, oh, it's going to be nice this weekend, I think we'll go away, have a weekend away. You can't do that because you've got your dogs to look after.
My thanks to Mick, Lester and Jackie for their candid and clear contributions. If you want to know more about the work of the Dog Handlers Consultative Committee, you can contact the POA's head office, Cronin House. However, the message from Jackie, Mick and Lester is clear. Dog handlers are a vital part of the prison service and a valued part of the POA. But as is always the case, the strength of the union voice is directly connected to the health of the union's membership figures. So, irrespective of your grade or occupational group, if you're not yet a member of the POA, sign up today by talking to your local POA representative or visiting poauk.org.uk, where you can find details of how to join and all the information you need on the work the union does in supporting its members. Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed what you have heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.